Hello, I'm Alex from Andy Best Recaps, and I'd love to tell you a story. In a world torn apart by endless war and pure chaos, a fragile, tiny angel, her black wings shredded and broken, swore on everything she had that she would get strong enough to crush all inequality and injustice. Time flew by, and that little angel evolved into the terrifying conqueror herself. A crew of adventurers, led by Lufas Mafahel, gathered their guts and came for her head. But man, did she unleash power beyond anyone's wildest dreams. We're talking an unstoppable ability that could utterly overwhelm even heroes of the absolute highest rank. It didn't matter how fierce their attacks were. Lufas always hit back with something even bigger, something even nastier. Even with all that raw power, she couldn't walk away from that insane clash totally unscathed. Their combined strength was just too freaking much. Still, for the entire battle, she gave off this aura that everything was completely under her control. Then, something totally unthinkable happened. One of the enemy warriors, in a move of pure desperation, deliberately allowed himself to be gravely wounded. Unleashing a true climax ability, a last-ditch effort that caught Lufas completely off guard, it ripped open just enough of an opening for the party's mage to cast a subspace seal, finally trapping the villainess. But even while imprisoned, she let out a wicked, chilling laugh and started taunting her captors, basically saying, "If you guys actually had the skill to take me down, maybe, just maybe, you might even stand a chance against Orm, the Demon King." Back in front of his computer, a kid scratches his head in defeat. He had just lost an epic fight in X-Gate Online, and Lufas had fallen, but at least he could say she fought until the very last breath. Suddenly, right there on his screen, Ola Venus, the goddess of creation herself, appeared, the actual deity who sculpted the entire world of X-Gate. She asked him if he'd be interested in taking on a brand new role inside that world. For him, this felt absolutely monumental, like a personal, direct message straight from the game developers. After all, his character, Lufas Mafahel, had become just as iconic, just as legendary as the Demon King himself. Naturally, the kid accepted, without a second thought. In an instant, he was pulled, yanked into X-Gate Online, not as an avatar this time, but in actual flesh and blood. A group of warriors and adventurers, following their king's command, had just broken the seal of the Black-Winged Conqueror, and they stared in absolute awe at the figure that manifested before them. Touching his new body, the player froze cold as he made a shocking realization. Underneath his clothing was a rather generous chest. Somehow, in a twist of fate, he had been reborn as his own character. When he first created Lufas, his reasoning was dead simple. If I'm going to stare at this character for hours and hours, she'd better be absolutely beautiful. That was literally his very first mission in the game. What he never ever expected was to become her himself, the terrifying, yet undeniably stunning Black-Winged Conqueror. Desperate for answers, the kid tried to ask a question, but the words that tore out weren't questions at all. They were commands, fierce, absolute, and carrying such raw, dominating force that the poor adventurers collapsed to the ground as if crushed by gravity itself. They could only obey. Realizing that his racial ability, intimidation, must have activated, Lufas forced herself with incredible effort to rein it back in. The moment she did, an elf among the group turned bone white. He was utterly convinced the conqueror has returned. Lufas, her voice sharp and merciless, demanded the elf explain how he knew her. Terrified, he fainted right there on the spot, leaving the others to try and fill in the blanks. From their stammering accounts, she pieced together the brutal truth. She had been sealed away for 200 long years, and the Demon King still reigned supreme over Misgars. These adventurers had tried to use the X-Gate spell to summon a hero powerful enough to defeat him, but instead, they had accidentally revived Lufas Mafahel. It finally dawned on the kid trapped inside her. He was truly, utterly inside the game, and the X-Gate spell, a central mythical mechanic that had never once appeared during his entire gameplay, had finally been used. As mind-blowingly awesome as this wasn't the time to geek out.
What mattered most now was figuring out the hell to do next. Seeing the abject fear plastered across everyone's faces, Lufas decided the best move was to simply get out of there. She told them to forget she ever existed and to just summon another hero in her place to go face the Demon King. Revenge for her sealing was definitely not on her radar. That last epic battle had been enough to last her a lifetime. No, this would no longer be the story of Lufas the Conqueror. Instead, it would be the journey of a young woman whose hopes had been shattered, now desperately searching for a new path. She wanted to see what the world had become, what form it had taken after 2 centuries. With that thought, Lufas spread her magnificent wings and soared into the skies, genuinely surprised to find she could still use them so freely. Soaring high into the open air, the boy, now the conqueror herself, felt an incredible rush of pure, unadulterated joy. He had been ripped into his favorite game, X-Gate Online, inhabiting a character he himself had meticulously created, a character so unbelievably powerful it thrilled him to the core. One day, he would definitely have to figure out how to get back to his original world, but that could wait. Soon after, he stumbled upon a towering landmark he hadn't seen in ages, an iconic structure at the very heart of the game's deep lore. X-Gate Online, set in the fantastical world of Mizgars, was a medieval fantasy MMO whose absolute crown jewel was its legendary PvP system. Players would swear fierce allegiance to a nation, wage brutal wars against rival kingdoms, and fight tooth and nail to claim victory for their side. But there was another feature that made the game truly unique: the groundbreaking narrative system which somehow adapted players' choices and actions into an official, evolving storyline. Lufas Mafahel was one of its most incredible examples. She had grinded her way to the level cap and become the strongest character in the entire game's existence. For the very first time in the game's history, her creator had managed to completely unify all of Mizgars under her iron rule. It was such a monumental, unbelievable fate that she was officially recognized in the lore, ever dubbed the Black-Winged Conqueror, and even granted semi-official legendary status by the developers themselves. But a world with only one supreme ruler, that sounded like zero fun to the kid. So he struck clever deals with other players, dividing them into 2 massive opposing armies: the Conqueror's Army, under Lufas, and the Army of Light, under the Hero's banner. They completely ignored the actual final boss of the game and instead staged the single largest, most epic battle in X-Gate's entire history. And as everyone knows by now, that was when Lufas was finally defeated and sealed away in subspace for centuries. Now, standing before the majestic sky tower of Mafahel, her very own fortress, Lufas makes her way to the Grand Throne Room. A powerful wave of inexplicable nostalgia washes over her as she takes in the Great Hall. Though dusty and utterly empty, it's still in good enough condition to be used. She sits upon the throne, and a flood of memories comes back. The friends she once had, the companions she gathered in this very tower to drink, laugh, and embark on insane missions to expand her dominion. Then a new memory suddenly surfaces, catching the player completely by surprise. At that exact moment, a young girl appears, absolutely stunned to find Lufas seated on the throne. With a radiant, blinding smile and a burst of pure excitement, she approaches her leader, the woman she has patiently, faithfully awaited for 200 long years. But Lufas doesn't share her overwhelming enthusiasm. In truth, she doesn't even remember who this girl is. Frustrated but utterly undeterred, the girl introduces herself as Dina, the Conqueror's advisor. Only then does the player recall placing an NPC in this tower when it was first created. Apparently, the generic backstory he had given her had been enough for Dina to develop her own genuine will and consciousness, which at least explains why she had been waiting so long. After all, Dina is no human player. To avoid making the situation even more awkward, Lufas quickly apologizes for forgetting such a loyal servant and genuinely thanks Dina for safeguarding the massive tower in her long absence. After Lufas recounts the incredible story of how she arrived there, Dina speculates that the ones responsible for freeing her master must have come from the western nation of Levitan, since they had been preparing a hero summoning ritual for quite some time. Curious about the state of the world, Lufas asks what has happened since her departure. Dina explains that the despised heroes who once defeated her master became legendary as the Seven Heroes, each going on to found their own powerful nation. 2 centuries have passed, and now 4 of them are dead, leaving only 3, all from races with naturally longer lifespans. The Demon King still lives, and so do the 12 celestial stars of conquest, the incredibly rare and powerful NPC beasts Lufus herself had designed to serve her in war. Back then, she believed a true ruler should always be surrounded by formidable subordinates, like 4 epic generals or something, so she meticulously created them. Dina knows the exact whereabouts of 6 of these creatures and reveals that 2 have actually joined the Demon King, believing they are avenging her death. Though they fight in her name, her master completely disapproves of the path they've taken and vows to deliver them a harsh, unforgettable reprimand. In any case, the Conqueror's creator intends to see the world's current state with her own eyes and confirm whether the 3 surviving heroes are actual players like him. For that, she must embark on a grand journey to reunite the 12 stars. Dina informs her that the nearest one, Ares the Ram, is located in Svel, home to one of the 3 remaining heroes, Megrez. Ares is currently camped out at the foot of a nearby volcano, still trying to break into Svel after all these years. Without a moment's hesitation, Lufus decides they should head there at once, but Dina warns her not to rush out carelessly. Her master is simply too well known, she would be instantly recognized by anyone. Yet Dina reminds her that long-lived races like the elves certainly would, and those distinct black wings are far too unique to ignore. On top of all that, the Conqueror's army is completely broke. If they truly plan to embark on this epic journey, they're going to need some serious cash. So, Dina suggests they go undercover in Svel, register with the Adventurers Guild, and start by taking on small, inconspicuous jobs to avoid drawing any attention.
And so, the pair sets out for Svel. Lufus dons a cloak that completely conceals her entire body, her majestic wings tucked tightly beneath her garments. Still, as she notices the lingering, curious stares of the townsfolk, she realizes she might actually be attracting a different kind of attention now. Regardless, the 2 head straight for the guild, which doubles as a bustling tavern and a gathering place for all adventurers. The moment she steps inside, Lufus feels an instant rush of familiarity. Surrounded by shady, rough-looking types, she's struck by a strange, almost comforting sense of belonging. It's a nostalgic reminder of her wild days as an adventurer before she ever founded her own nation. Standing before the quest board, Dina suggests they start small with a simple job paying 120 Li to find a dozen lost cats. But Lufus quickly points out that tracking animals by scent is a beastman skill, making it far too difficult for them. So Dina finds another request, exterminating orcs, affectionately known as porks. When slain, they have a 3% chance of dropping an item that increases maximum HP, a perfect chance to earn not only the 150 Li reward, but potentially rare sweet loot as well. Without wasting a single second, the 2 travel to Isle Village. There, the elder pours out his heart, recounting his worries. The porks have been rampaging, destroying homes, kidnapping women, and brutally killing the village's young men. Dina reassures the terrified people that the ultimate solution to all their problems is standing right before them. And that solution is none other than Lufus Mothahel. After locating the grotesque pork nest, Dina shudders, remarking that even the goddess of creation must regret every single day having made such a vile, disgusting race. Lufus responds that the goddess is merciful and loves all equally, but Dina insists that Allovinus is not quite so benevolent when it comes to these guys. Either way, she's absolutely eager to see her master wipe out these filthy orcs once and for all. Lufus steps forward, spreading her vast, powerful black wings as she prepares for battle. First, she meticulously checks her status to confirm she truly is at the maximum level, and that everything is in perfect order to absolutely devastate these swine-like creatures. Of course, there's a massive difference between crushing enemies with a controller in hand and doing it in real life. The player feels a flicker of genuine unease. But since they're already here, it's better to try than to back down like a coward. With that firmly in mind, Lufus snaps her fingers, awakening her incredible alchemic creation skill. At once, dozens of magical swords erupt from the very earth and launch themselves with deadly precision toward the enemy monsters, tearing through the guards at the entrance with sinister ease and brutal, horrifying violence. Though she's the one slaughtering these creatures without mercy, the player feels absolutely nothing as the massacre unfolds. In the next instant, every single orc rushes out from within the cave to face the intruder. There's an overwhelming, terrifying number of warriors, and at the absolute center of it all, their massive, grotesque leader looms, promising to be a far, far greater threat. Dina's jaw drops in pure fear, while Lufus remains perfectly composed, radiating calm. The moment the monsters charge at her, the Conqueror realizes just how absurdly, laughably slow they are. Every single movement looks like the agonizing crawl of crippled slugs compared to her lightning speed. With almost laughable ease, Mothahel rips the heads off the lesser orcs as if it were nothing more than a child's pathetic game. As blood rains down, the larger orc's eyes quivered with pure dread, and the black-winged Conqueror can't help but reflect on just how incredibly fragile these creatures truly are. In a desperate, primal frenzy, the orc chief hurls himself forward with all his immense weight, unleashing blow after blow. The very ground shakes beneath his fury, the terrain collapsing into utter chaos. And yet, despite this raging storm of blind rage, Lufus remains utterly untouched, pristine, completely unscathed. As flames rise, wrapping the monstrous chief in a fiery prison, the winged celestial reflects that the real difference isn't their fragility at all. It's that her strength and speed are so astronomically far beyond theirs. These orcs might as well be nothing more than dust. With that chilling thought, Lufus gently presses her closed fist against the enemy leader's head. His skull bursts apart in an instant, a gruesome, sickening display. Dina stares at the grotesque sight, her face frozen somewhere between pure terror and absolute awe, while her master, having crushed the fight so easily, concludes that this could never truly be called a battle. No, it was a massacre.
After exterminating the orcs, it was time to inspect what they might have left behind. Dina then mentions that they got lucky in their hunt, because when orcs are defeated without damaging their backs, their vitality remains in their bodies, which can then be used to increase the vitality of whoever consumes it. Normally, these monsters are always in battles and end up wounded, so finding an orc with its back in perfect condition is extremely rare, with only a 3% chance. Upon learning this, Lufus already devises a plan to defeat orcs without damaging the meat, while Dina, her faithful servant, promises to cook the item later for her master. To make things easier, Dina teleports all the carcasses to the tower, where she can analyze them later. Lufus is impressed by the amount of power and knowledge her servant possesses. Setting that aside, the two set off to rescue the village women who had been kidnapped. Upon freeing them, Dina notes with relief that they are all okay. What she doesn't understand, however, is how none of them were violated, since orcs are grotesque creatures. To her surprise, Lufus explains that they are in fact gentler than they seem, at least with women, seeking to earn their affection with a certain respect. Still, it was clear that the trauma of the kidnapping was already a severe form of violence. Because of this, the Celestial declares that it's impossible for orcs and humans to live in peace. With a gesture, she summons the gigantic fist of Hrungnir and crushes the orc's hideout until nothing is left, ensuring that none would survive. After composing herself from that grim spectacle, Dina asks if her master would like her to erase the prisoners' memories to spare them the trauma. Lufus questions if there's a way to reverse the process, and upon learning there is a small possibility, decides to leave things as they are, at least for now. And so, aboard a giant golem, the two take the women back to the village. On the way, Lufus admits she doesn't understand why people no longer take jobs to kill orcs. For her, it was the easiest thing in the world, and the monsters can still drop valuable items. Dina then explains that the world has changed a lot in the last 200 years. People today are much weaker in the era when the feared Lufus ruled. She explains that the kingdom that summoned her is called Lavatane, or the Kingdom of the Sword, and that the strongest swordsman in this land is level 120. This leaves Lufus absolutely shocked, as in her time, surpassing level 100 was relatively simple, and many people reached level 1000 in the game. According to Dina, society's mindset has changed. After all, you only live once. To reach an absurdly high level, people would have to train day after day without rest, giving up everything just to maybe reach that point. Because of that, most preferred to live more normal lives. In that sense, Lufus could understand.
After all, this wasn't a game anymore. With that thought, she raises her head to the sky and reflects on her servant's words, "You only live once." The scene shifts, and a few hours later, as they arrive at the village, joy fills the air. The women were finally safe. The villagers, extremely grateful, paid the promised 1,500 lei, and Lufus even decides to leave the golem behind as a guardian. The village elder no longer knew how to thank her, even calling the Celestial a goddess. Lufus smiles but says nothing. In truth, she was practically the opposite of that. Finally, they prepared to leave. One of the villagers asked for the heroine's name, and since she couldn't reveal her real one, Lufus grows uneasy. Dina quickly steps in and says her master's name is Svalu, a terribly obvious anagram of Lufus. So much so that as soon as they are out of sight, Lufus stomps hard on the girl's foot, mentioning that the name was ridiculous and dangerous, sounding absurdly fake. Nevertheless, Dina, unshakable as always, tanks the pain of the stomp and walks on, confident she did the best she could under pressure. The next day, they take a carriage. With the money they've earned, they can now eat and sleep well and still have a good amount saved. Furthermore, Lufus ate the orc loin and increased her vitality. In other words, this was a great start to their journey, and their next destination was the nation of Svel. Now that they had money, the plan was to find Ares, the ram, one of the 12 heavenly stars, who, for some reason, had been relentlessly attacking Svel. Lufus also wanted to find out if there were other players like her in this world, perhaps the members of the 7 heroes who had defeated her. The first to look for would be Megrez, the ruler of the country they were heading to. After a long trip, they passed through a beautiful field of flowers emitting bright particles. Lufus asks what it is, and Dina explains that it's mana. That nation was rich in this element, and the pulsing field was a sign they were close. Looking out the window, Dina is amazed by the sight of the beautiful city of Water, the nation founded by Megrez. At the entrance gate, however, they are stopped as a visa is required to enter. Lufus is furious for not knowing this, but pulling a rabbit out of her hat, Dina shows a visa to the guard, with her name and the Celestial's fake name, Svalu. The guard comments that it's common for people to forge visas, but that he'd never fall for such a trick. Then he declares the document genuine and lets them pass, even though Lufus is certain the thing was fake. As the scene evolves and now they're inside the city, the talkative assistant begins a small lecture explaining that the magical nation of Svel was founded by one of the 7 heroes, the elf known as Wise King Megrez. The country is famous for its abundance of mana, used to fund magic schools and the pursuit of knowledge, which is why people from all over the world come here. Lufus asks if the lake's glow is also mana, and Dina confirms, asking if her master isn't bothered, since celestial beings usually don't get along with that much mana. Lufus says that for some reason she feels perfectly fine, comfortable enough to go and meet with Megrez.
Dina worries she might want to invade the castle, but Lufus assures her she doesn't want to cause trouble. She wants to resolve the situation with Ares peacefully, and for that, she first needs to visit the city's library to find out, from the history books, what has happened to the world in the last 200 years. They ask a man, who introduces himself as Goths, a mercenary, where the library is, and he offers to take them. Dina introduces herself and the suspicious, cloaked figure beside her as Svalun. Because of the slip-up, she gets another stomp on her foot. As they walk, Dina comments on how cozy the city is, and Gauntz agrees, lamenting that Ares' attacks have been scaring away visitors. Even so, he assures them the place will stand strong, as the entire lake surrounding the country is actually a water golem, created through alchemy by King Megrez. Lufus analyzes the golem's status and discovers it's a guardian deity named Levia with an absurd HP of 180,000 points. The scene moves on, and in the library, Lufus searches for more recent history books. On a certain shelf, she finds several books telling her own story, usually portraying her as a controversial or evil figure. She doesn't understand how Megrez allows texts that even question the 7 heroes themselves, and Dina explains that Megrez is not a tyrant. Speaking of which, she assures Lufus that Mafahal's image isn't as bad as she thinks, and that today, many believe that if Lufus were in power, humanity wouldn't need to fear the demons, especially since she was never a tyrant. Reading one of the books, Lufus sees her history, a celestial who appeared 200 years ago and unified the world in the blink of an eye. She expelled tyrants and saved nations. Even so, part of humanity turned against her, demanding independence. This division strengthened the demons, who once feared the unity under the leadership of the black-winged conqueror. With countries becoming independent, the creatures of darkness gained power and inflicted devastating defeats. Currently, humanity is squeezed into a few remaining areas, and the Age of Men is on the verge of ending. Reading this, Lufus nearly falls into despair. She knew the Demon King was still alive, but she never imagined the situation was this catastrophic. She thinks about how she was thrown into this world that was a game, and when it became real, everything was falling apart. Now, with everything in perspective, she understood why a domain as small as Svel was called a country. Humanity was hanging by a thread. After her investigation, Lufus plans to go after Ares, but an earthquake stops her. An unprecedented devastation begins in the city. The intense vibration damages houses and puts lives at risk. Immediately after the tremors, the city's sound system orders all mercenaries to the border. However, Lufus knows Ares possesses an earthquake ability and is certain he is the cause. Dina also knows he's coming, and at that moment, an intense fluctuation of mana is felt from the direction of the epicenter. To get there quickly, Lufus uses her alchemy to create a giant bird from the city's broken stones. While Dina nearly freaks out in fear, her master lets her hold on. On the way, Lufus doesn't understand how Ares can be acting like this, since according to her, he is a multicolored ram, a being that hates conflict. She thinks that perhaps her defeat by the Seven Heroes is the reason, and that this is his revenge. And speaking of the ram, the Celestial is suddenly struck by a vision, a memory of the animal as a young lamb. Meanwhile, marching towards Fel, a horde of monsters is being led by a creature consumed by hatred. And with this promise of an epic confrontation, today's episode comes to an end. Will Lufus be able to stop her former ally? Why has Ares become this creature full of hatred? If you want to find out, you know what to do. Smash that like and hype to show your support, comment your theories, and of course, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this incredible story.